Sarah's cell phone buzzed on my kitchen counter like an angry bee, displaying my dead husband's face and a text that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful." The phone slipped from my hands as I realized Bill had been dead for 5 years, but somehow he was still making plans. What I discovered next would prove that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a carefully constructed lie. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Now, let me tell you about the moment my entire world shifted. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in October when my daughter-in-law Sarah forgot her phone at my house after our weekly coffee. I was 67, comfortable in my routine, living in the same house where Bill and I had raised our son Kevin. 5 years of widowhood had finally started feeling manageable until that phone lit up. I stared at the device like it might explode. Bill's contact photo smiled back at me, that familiar grin I'd kissed goodbye 1,000 mornings. But Bill Sullivan had died of a heart attack in 2019. I'd held his hand as he slipped away. I'd buried him in his favorite blue suit. I'd grieved him for 5 long years. My hands shook as I picked up the phone again. The message was still there, time-stamped just minutes ago. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Beautiful. Same place as always. Love you." I sank into my kitchen chair, mind racing. Who had Bill's phone number? Who was using his contact information? More importantly, who was he supposedly meeting tonight? The rational part of my brain suggested a simple explanation. Maybe Sarah had never deleted Bill's contact, and someone with his old number was texting by mistake. But the message was too specific, too intimate. Same place as always. This wasn't a wrong number. I scrolled through Sarah's recent messages, feeling guilty but driven by a need to understand. Most were mundane family group texts, grocery lists, appointment reminders. But there, scattered throughout the past few months, were more messages from Bill Sullivan. "Missing you. Thursday works perfectly. Kevin's working late again. Love our secret time together." Each message hit me like a physical blow. These weren't random texts from a stranger. Someone was deliberately using my dead husband's contact information to communicate with my daughter-in-law. Someone who knew Kevin's schedule, knew about secret meetings. Someone who called Sarah beautiful. The implications crashed over me in waves. Sarah was having an affair with someone pretending to be Bill. Or worse, someone who'd been using Bill's identity for who knows how long. I thought about the past 5 years since Bill's death, how Sarah had been so supportive, so helpful during my grief, how she'd encouraged me to keep Bill's memory alive, to talk about him whenever I needed to, how she'd insisted on keeping some of his belongings, for sentimental reasons. His phone. Sarah had asked for Bill's phone after the funeral, said she wanted to preserve his voicemails, keep his contact information for the family. I thought it was sweet, a way to honor his memory. Now I wondered what she'd really wanted with that phone. Sarah worked part-time at a dental office, but she'd been coming home with expensive clothes, new jewelry, talking about spa days and lunch meetings. Kevin worked construction, good money, but not luxury lifestyle money. I'd assumed they were managing their finances well. Maybe Kevin had gotten raises I didn't know about. But those text messages painted a different picture. Secret meetings while Kevin worked. Someone calling her beautiful, telling her he loved her. Someone with access to Bill's contact information and enough knowledge of our family to make this charade work. My coffee had gone cold as I sat there processing this betrayal. Not just Sarah's affair, but the sick manipulation of using my dead husband's identity to cover it up. Every time I'd mourned Bill, every time I'd honored his memory, had she been laughing at my ignorance? The phone buzzed again. Another message from Bill. Running 5 minutes late. Traffic on Highway 6. Whoever Sarah was meeting was heading there right now. Same place as always. Where was always for Sarah and her mysterious lover? I grabbed my keys and handbag, surprising myself with my decisiveness. For 5 years, I'd been the grieving widow, the helpful mother-in-law, the woman who accepted what she was told and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. But sitting in my kitchen, holding evidence of such calculated cruelty, something inside me hardened. I was going to find out who was playing this sick game with my family. And when I did, they were going to learn that underestimating a 67-year-old widow had been their first mistake. I followed Sarah's usual route from my house toward downtown, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird. In 42 years of marriage, I'd never followed anyone, never played detective, never imagined I'd be capable of such deception. But then again, I'd never imagined my daughter-in-law would use my dead husband's identity to cover an affair. The October afternoon was crisp, leaves crunching under my tires as I kept Sarah's silver Honda in sight. She drove confidently, no hesitation, taking familiar turns that suggested this journey was routine. 3 blocks from downtown, she pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Inn, a modest hotel that catered to business travelers and weekend getaways. I parked across the street behind a landscaping truck, feeling like a character in one of those crime shows Bill used to watch. Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, smoothing her hair. She'd changed clothes since leaving my house, I realized. The casual jeans and sweater she'd worn for coffee had been replaced by a black dress and heels. At 3:47 p.m., exactly when Bill had said he'd arrive, a dark blue sedan pulled up next to Sarah's car. My breath caught as I recognized the driver stepping out. Dr. Marcus Webb, Kevin's boss. Marcus was maybe 50, divorced, owned the construction company where my son had worked for 8 years. He'd been to our house for barbecues, Christmas parties, Kevin's birthday celebrations. He'd shaken my hand at Bill's funeral and told me what a good man my husband had been. Now he was kissing my daughter-in-law in a hotel parking lot while my son believed his wife was running errands. They walked into the hotel together, Sarah's hand in Marcus's, looking for all the world like any couple checking in for an afternoon tryst. Except one of them was married to Marcus's employee, and both of them were sick enough to use a dead man's phone number for their communications. I sat in my car for an hour, watching the hotel entrance, trying to process what I'd witnessed. This wasn't a recent development. The text messages, the familiarity, the same place as always reference, all suggested this affair had been going on for months, maybe years. How long had they been making a fool of Kevin? How long had they been using Bill's memory as a cover for their betrayal? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? When Sarah and Marcus finally emerged at 5:15, they looked relaxed, satisfied, sharing quiet conversation as they walked to their cars. Sarah checked her phone immediately, probably seeing if Kevin had texted about dinner plans or evening schedules. I waited until they'd both driven away before heading home, my mind spinning with implications and possibilities. Kevin would be home from work in an hour. Sarah would arrive shortly after, probably with some story about errands or grocery shopping. They'd have dinner together, maybe watch television, go to bed as husband and wife, but everything about that domestic scene would be built on lies. Back in my kitchen, I poured myself a glass of wine with shaking hands. Bill's reading glasses still sat on the counter where he'd left them 5 years ago. His coffee mug still hung on its hook by the sink. I'd preserved his memory carefully, lovingly, keeping his presence alive in small ways that brought me comfort during the darkest days of grief. Sarah knew all of this. She'd sat in this kitchen countless times, listening to me share memories of Bill, watching me light his memorial candle on special occasions. She'd encouraged my grief rituals, even suggested new ways to honor his memory, all while using his phone number to coordinate secret meetings with her lover. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Not content with simply having an affair, she'd chosen to weaponize my love for Bill, turning his memory into a tool for deception. Every time I'd spoken his name with reverence, had she been fighting not to laugh? My wine tasted bitter as I considered my options. I could confront Sarah directly, demand an explanation, threaten to tell Kevin. But she'd had years to perfect her lies. Probably had explanations ready for any questions I might ask. I could tell Kevin immediately, show him the text messages, destroy his marriage in one devastating conversation. But Kevin adored Sarah, had been planning to start a family with her. Learning about her affair would shatter him, and learning about the Bill connection would be even more devastating. Or I could investigate further, gather more evidence, understand the full scope of their deception before deciding how to proceed. As I sat there considering my choices, Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another message from Bill Sullivan. Thanks for a beautiful afternoon. Kevin working late Thursday? Same time? The casual scheduling of betrayal, using my husband's name like a password for adultery. Whatever Sarah and Marcus thought they were playing, they'd chosen the wrong widow to manipulate. I screenshot the message and scrolled back through months of their communication, documenting everything. If I was going to expose this sick game, I needed to understand all the rules first. By the time Kevin's truck pulled into the driveway, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to be the helpful, naive mother-in-law anymore. Sarah wanted to play games with Bill's memory? She was about to learn that some games have consequences she never saw coming. 3 days of playing detective had revealed the ugly truth about my daughter-in-law's double life. Sarah wasn't just having an affair with Marcus Webb. She was running a sophisticated deception that went far deeper than stolen afternoons at cheap hotels. And the more I discovered, the more certain I became that my son Kevin was walking blindly toward destruction. Thursday afternoon, I sat in my car outside Riverside Inn again, but this time I wasn't alone. Rose Patterson, my neighbor and retired paralegal, had agreed to help me document what she called evidence gathering. Rose had been through a messy divorce herself and understood the importance of proof. "There's Marcus's car," Rose whispered unnecessarily as the familiar blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Right on schedule. We watched Sarah arrive 10 minutes later, again changed from her casual morning clothes into something more appropriate for seduction. The routine was identical to Tuesday's encounter, down to the makeup check in her rearview mirror. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Rose asked as we settled in to wait. "Long enough for them to get careless," I replied, thinking about the months of text messages I'd been documenting. "But I think there's more to this than just an affair." Rose raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I pulled out a folder I'd been compiling. "Yesterday, I went to the bank to check on something. Bill had a small investment account that I never closed after he died. The statements go to an old email address, so I hadn't looked at it in years. And someone's been making withdrawals. Small amounts. Nothing that would trigger alerts, but consistent. 500 here, 300 there. Over the past 3 years, about $15,000 has disappeared from that account." Rose's expression grew serious. "Identity theft?" "That's what I thought initially. But look at this." I showed her printed bank records. "The withdrawals always happen on the same days Sarah visits me for coffee. The same days she forgets her phone or her purse or needs to use my bathroom." Understanding dawned on Rose's face. "She's been in your house, with access to Bill's papers, his social security number, account information, passwords I foolishly wrote down and kept in his desk drawer. Sarah helped me organize his papers after the funeral. She insisted on helping, said it was too overwhelming for me to handle alone." The pieces of Sarah's long-term deception were finally becoming clear. The affair with Marcus was just one component of a larger scheme. She'd been systematically stealing from Bill's estate while playing the devoted daughter-in-law. "Does Kevin know about this account?" Rose asked. "No, it was money Bill set aside years ago, before we even met Sarah. I'd planned to give it to Kevin eventually, maybe for a house down payment when he and Sarah started having children." The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah was stealing money I'd intended to give her anyway, money that would have been Kevin's inheritance. But apparently, being given money wasn't enough. She preferred taking it through deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. "Mom, can you come to dinner Sunday? Sarah's making your favorite roast." I stared at the message, imagining Sarah in my kitchen, playing the perfect wife while planning her next theft or scheduling her next hotel meeting. The audacity was staggering. "What are you going to do?" Rose asked, watching my face. "I'm going to that dinner," I said slowly. "But first I'm going to make sure I understand exactly how deep this goes." Friday morning, I called Bill's old firm where he'd worked as an accountant for 20 years. His former partner, Jim Morrison, had always told me to reach out if I needed anything. "Margaret," Jim's voice was warm when I explained who was calling. "How are you holding up? It's been, 5 years now?" 5 years this December. "Jim, I need to ask you about something, and I hope it won't sound strange." "Shoot." "After Bill died, did anyone ever contact your office asking about his files or client information? Anyone claiming to be family or saying they needed records for estate purposes?" There was a long pause. "Actually, yes. About 3 years ago, a young woman called saying she was your daughter-in-law and needed copies of some documents for tax purposes. She had all the right information, knew details about Bill's work, even knew his middle name and anniversary date." My stomach dropped. "Did you give her anything?" "She seemed legitimate. And she said you'd sent her because you were too overwhelmed to handle it yourself. I sent her copies of his final tax returns, some investment account information." Margaret Was that not okay? That woman has been stealing from Bill's accounts for years, I said quietly. Jesus Christ. Margaret, I'm so sorry. She was very convincing, knew things only family would know. She learned those things by going through his personal papers in my house. Jim, I need to know exactly what you sent her. The list was devastating. Tax returns showing hidden accounts, investment records with access codes, even copies of insurance policies Sarah could potentially claim against. She'd used my grief and trust to gain access to Bill's professional records, expanding her theft beyond what she could steal from my house. We need to involve the police, Jim said when I finished explaining. This is serious fraud. Margaret, identity theft, forgery, probably multiple felonies. Not yet, I said. I need to handle this my way first. Sunday dinner loomed ahead of me like a reckoning. Sarah would serve my favorite roast, probably using my mother's recipe that I'd shared with her years ago. Kevin would beam with pride at his wife's cooking, completely unaware that she'd been robbing his family for years. But this time, I wouldn't be the grateful mother-in-law, thankful for inclusion in their domestic bliss. This time, I'd be watching Sarah's performance with full knowledge of what she really was, and I'd be deciding exactly how to destroy her. Sunday dinner at Kevin and Sarah's house felt like attending my own wake. I sat at their dining room table, smiling politely as Sarah served her perfect roast, watching my son's face light up with marital pride, knowing that everything about this domestic scene was built on theft and betrayal. This is delicious, sweetheart, Kevin told Sarah, squeezing her hand. Mom, doesn't she make the best roast? Wonderful, I agreed, though the food tasted like cardboard. You've certainly perfected the recipe. Sarah beamed, playing her role flawlessly. Your mother taught me everything I know about cooking, Kevin. She's been such an incredible mentor. The word mentor stuck in my throat. I'd mentored her, all right. Mentored her in gaining access to Bill's papers. Mentored her in understanding our family's financial history. Mentored her in exploiting my grief for her personal gain. How's work going? Kevin? I asked, watching Marcus Webb's lover serve dessert to my oblivious son. Really good, actually. Marcus has been talking about promoting me to supervisor. Says I've got the best work ethic on the crew. Kevin's pride was obvious. He's been like a father figure since Dad died. A father figure. The man who was sleeping with Kevin's wife had positioned himself as a paternal mentor. The manipulation was so layered, so complete, that I felt sick imagining how long they'd been orchestrating this deception. That's wonderful news, Sarah chimed in. Marcus always speaks so highly of you, says you're indispensable. I bet he does, I thought. Hard to fire the husband of the woman you're screwing in hotel rooms twice a week. After dinner, Kevin went to the garage to work on his motorcycle, leaving Sarah and me alone in the kitchen. She moved efficiently, loading the dishwasher with practiced domesticity, occasionally glancing at me with what I'd once thought was affection, but now recognized as assessment. You seem quiet tonight, Margaret, she said, not looking up from the dishes. Everything okay? This was my moment. I could confront her here, demand explanations, threaten exposure, or I could continue gathering information, playing the game until I had enough evidence to destroy her completely. I chose the latter. Just thinking about Bill, I said truthfully. Dinner like this reminds me of family meals we used to have. Sarah's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their work. I'm sure you miss him terribly. He was such a special man. Yes, he was. Sometimes I feel like he's still with us, you know? Like his presence is still part of our family. That's beautiful, Sarah murmured. I love that you keep his memory alive. The audacity of her sympathy when she'd been using his memory as a cover for adultery and theft nearly broke my composure. But I maintained my grieving widow act, watching her face for any crack in her performance. Sarah, can I ask you something? Of course. That day you forgot your phone here Tuesday. I hope you don't mind, but it kept buzzing and I was worried it might be an emergency. I saw some text messages. Sarah went very still. Oh? From someone named Bill Sullivan. I thought it was odd, you know. Since that's my husband's name. The color drained from Sarah's face, but she recovered quickly. Oh, that. Yes, that's weird, isn't it? Some guy with the same name has been texting me by mistake for months. Wrong number situation. I keep meaning to block him, but the messages are harmless enough. Wrong number, I repeated. But the messages seemed quite personal. Something about meeting somewhere? Sarah's laugh sounded forced. Yeah, he's apparently having an affair with someone named Sarah. Keeps texting me instead of his girlfriend. I feel bad for his wife, whoever she is. The lie came so smoothly, so effortlessly, so that I realized Sarah was far more dangerous than I'd originally thought. She wasn't just stealing money and cheating on my son. She was a practiced manipulator who could fabricate explanations without missing a beat. That must be frustrating, I said. Have you thought about changing your number? I probably should. I just hate the hassle of updating everything. Kevin returned from the garage, grease on his hands and excitement in his voice. Marcus is letting me borrow his truck next weekend to help the Thompsons move. Says it's good for building client relationships. That's very generous of him, I said, watching Sarah's face. She was texting someone, probably Marcus himself, fingers flying over her phone with practiced ease. Marcus has been amazing, Kevin continued. Really taken me under his wing since Dad died. Says he sees potential in me that other people miss. The tragedy of Kevin's gratitude hit me like a physical blow. My son was genuinely grateful to the man who was destroying his marriage, seeing mentorship where there was manipulation, kindness where there was calculated control. He sounds like a wonderful boss, I managed. The best. Sarah's always saying how lucky I am to work for someone who cares about our family. Sarah looked up from her phone, smiling at Kevin with what looked like genuine affection. Marcus really does care about us. He's always asking about you, making sure you're happy. I'm sure he is, I thought. Keeping tabs on the husband while screwing the wife required careful attention to detail. The evening ended with hugs and promises to get together again soon. Sarah held me a little longer than usual, and for a moment I wondered if she suspected something. But her smile remained perfectly calibrated, her performance flawless. Drive safe, she called as I got into my car. Text when you get home so we know you made it okay. As I drove home through the October darkness, I realized that confronting Sarah directly would be pointless. She was too skilled a liar, too prepared for questions. Any evidence I presented, she'd have explanations for. Any accusations I made, she'd deflect with hurt feelings and righteous indignation. But everyone has a breaking point. Every performance has flaws. And I was going to find Sarah's weakness, then exploit it without mercy. Kevin deserved better than being unknowingly married to a thief and adulteress. Bill's memory deserved better than being used as a cover for betrayal. And I deserved the satisfaction of watching Sarah's perfect life crumble when her victims finally fought back. Monday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee in my kitchen when the doorbell rang, revealing Marcus Webb standing on my porch with flowers and a nervous smile. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to thank you for raising such an incredible son." The audacity nearly took my breath away. Here was the man who'd been using my dead husband's name to coordinate affair meetings, standing at my door with grocery store carnations and practiced charm. "Marcus," I said, forcing a smile, "what a nice surprise. Come in." He followed me to the kitchen, setting the flowers on my counter with theatrical consideration. "These seemed appropriate for fall," he said. "Kevin's told me how much you love fresh flowers." Kevin had told him that because Sarah had learned it from me, probably during one of her information-gathering visits to my house. The circularity of their manipulation was dizzying. "Coffee?" I offered. That would be great, thank you." I poured him a cup, studying his face as he settled into the chair where Sarah usually sat during our weekly visits. Marcus was handsome in a weathered way, silver threading through dark hair, laugh lines around intelligent brown eyes. I could see why Sarah had been attracted to him. "I wanted to talk to you about Kevin," Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "He's been with my company for 8 years now, and I've watched him grow from a young man who just wanted steady work into someone with real leadership potential." "That's wonderful to hear," I said. "Kevin's always been hardworking. More than that, he's honest, reliable, never misses a day, never complains about overtime or difficult projects. Those qualities are rare in this business." I nodded, wondering where this conversation was heading. Marcus seemed genuinely sincere when talking about Kevin's work performance, which made his betrayal even more twisted. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "I'm thinking about expanding the business, opening a second location, maybe branching into commercial projects. I'd need someone I trust completely to help manage that growth. That sounds like a big opportunity. It would be. Significant pay increase, profit sharing, real advancement potential. The kind of position that could set Kevin and Sarah up for life. There it was. The carrot Marcus was dangling to keep Kevin happy and unsuspecting while he destroyed Kevin's marriage from the inside. Give the husband professional success while stealing his wife. Keep him grateful and distracted while committing the ultimate betrayal. Kevin would be thrilled, I said carefully. He's always wanted to build something meaningful. That's what I thought. But I wanted to run it by you first. Get your blessing. You're the matriarch of this family, and your opinion matters to both Kevin and Sarah. Matriarch. He was positioning me as the family elder whose approval he needed, playing to my ego while manipulating my influence. If I endorsed his promotion plans, Kevin would be even more indebted to Marcus, even less likely to question anything about their relationship. That's very thoughtful of you, I said. But shouldn't you discuss this with Kevin directly? I will. Of course. But Sarah suggested I talk to you first. She said you have tremendous influence on Kevin's decisions, that he values your wisdom above almost anything else. Sarah had suggested this, which meant they'd discussed me, analyzed my relationship with Kevin, strategized about how to use my influence for their purposes. The premeditation was breathtaking. Sarah said that? She speaks about you constantly, Marcus continued, his voice warming with apparent affection. Says you're the strongest woman she knows, that losing Bill would have destroyed most people, but you've rebuilt your life with grace and dignity. The irony was devastating. Sarah had described me as strong and dignified while systematically robbing and deceiving me for years. She'd praised my grace while using my grief as a tool for manipulation. She's very kind, I managed. More than kind. She loves you like her own mother, always worrying about whether you're lonely, whether you need anything, whether Kevin and I are paying enough attention to your needs. My needs. While pretending to worry about my emotional well-being, Sarah had been stealing my husband's money and using his identity to cover her affair. The cruelty was so complete, so calculating, that I felt momentarily dizzy with rage. We're very close, I said. It shows. Kevin's so lucky to have both of you in his life, a devoted wife and a loving mother who clearly raised him right. Marcus finished his coffee and stood, checking his watch. I should get going. Job site calls. But I'm glad we had this conversation, Mrs. Sullivan. It means a lot to know you support Kevin's advancement. Of course, I said, walking him to the door. Kevin's happiness is all that matters to me. Mine too, Marcus said, and for a moment his expression seemed genuine. He's like the son I never had. After he left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the carnations he'd brought, trying to process what I'd witnessed. Marcus wasn't a cartoon villain gleefully destroying my family for sport. He seemed to genuinely care about Kevin's professional success, genuinely believe he was helping my son build a better future, which made his betrayal even more twisted. He was advancing Kevin's career while sleeping with Kevin's wife. He was playing mentor and father figure while committing the ultimate violation of trust. The cognitive dissonance required for such behavior suggested a level of self-deception that was almost pathological. But it also revealed something important. Marcus didn't see himself as the villain in this story. He'd rationalized his actions, convinced himself that he was helping Kevin even as he destroyed him. That self-justification might be his weakness. I spent the afternoon researching Marcus Webb's background, using the internet skills my granddaughter had taught me. What I found painted a picture of a man with a pattern of complicated relationships. Divorced twice, both times from wives who'd accused him of infidelity. No children of his own, despite being married for a total of 15 years. Marcus collected broken families, positioned himself as a savior, then systematically destroyed what he claimed to be protecting. Kevin wasn't his first victim, just his most recent. The flowers sat on my counter, bright and cheerful and utterly deceptive. Like everything else in my life lately, they looked innocent, but represented something much darker. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Kevin said Marcus stopped by. Hope that went well. He really respects your opinion. I stared at the message, seeing it now for what it really was. Surveillance disguised as family concern. Sarah wasn't asking about Marcus's visit out of casual interest. She was making sure their manipulation had worked, checking whether I'd been successfully enrolled in their deception. "Very nice visit," I texted back. "He clearly cares about Kevin's future." "He does. We're so grateful to have him in our lives." "We're." Sarah was speaking for herself and Kevin, but she meant herself and Marcus. They were grateful to have found another victim to exploit, another family to destroy while playing benefactor. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that a 67-year-old widow would be easy to manipulate, too grief-stricken and naive to see through their performance. They were about to learn how wrong they'd been. The breaking point came on Thursday afternoon when I decided to visit Sarah at her workplace. The dental office where she worked part-time was in a strip mall near the hospital, a small practice that specialized in routine cleanings and minor procedures. Mrs. Sullivan, the receptionist, a young woman named Amy, greeted me with genuine warmth. "What a nice surprise. Are you here to see Sarah?" "If she's not too busy," I said. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd say hello. She's just finishing with a patient. Should be free in about 10 minutes. Can I get you some coffee?" I accepted the coffee and settled into the waiting room, surrounded by outdated magazines and cheerful dental hygiene posters. The normalcy of the setting felt surreal given what I knew about Sarah's double life. "Sarah's such a sweetheart," Amy continued, clearly comfortable chatting with patients' families. "We're all so happy she's found someone." My blood went cold. "Found someone?" Amy's face flushed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I assumed you knew about her boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "The older gentleman who picks her up sometimes. Very distinguished. Drives a nice car. She seems so happy when she's with him. Marcus. He'd been picking Sarah up from work, probably taking her to lunch, maybe afternoon hotel visits. And Sarah's co-workers knew about him, talked about him, saw him as her boyfriend rather than her boss's husband's employer." "How long has she been seeing him?" I asked. Amy glanced around nervously, realizing she'd made a mistake. "I really shouldn't gossip about personal lives." "Of course not," I said quickly. "I just want Sarah to be happy." "About 6 months, I think. Maybe longer. He sent flowers here once for her birthday." Beautiful arrangement. The card was signed, "Love Always M." 6 months. While Kevin had been planning their future, talking about starting a family, working overtime to save money for a house down payment, Sarah had been publicly dating his boss. Her co-workers knew. Her friends probably knew. Everyone except Kevin. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Sarah's voice made me turn. She stood in the doorway to the treatment area, her face a mask of professional composure, but I caught the flash of panic in her eyes. "What brings you here?" "I was running errands nearby," I said, standing to greet her. "Thought I'd say hello." "How thoughtful." "Amy, this is my mother-in-law I've told you about." Amy's face went from embarrassed to mortified as she realized the scope of her mistake. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize." "No need to apologize," I said gently. "You were just being friendly." Sarah's smile remained fixed, but her eyes were sharp with calculation. Amy loves to chat with everyone, gets a little carried away sometimes with office gossip. The warning in Sarah's voice was subtle but clear. Amy was being told to shut up about Sarah's personal life, and she understood perfectly. "Well," Sarah continued brightly, "I'm between patients right now. Would you like to see the office?" She led me on a brief tour, pointing out equipment and explaining procedures with nervous energy. Her colleagues were friendly but guarded now, clearly having received some signal about discretion. "So," Sarah said when we returned to the reception area, "what kind of errands brought you to this part of town?" The question sounded casual, but I recognized it as information gathering. Sarah wanted to know if my visit was truly coincidental or if I was investigating something. "Banking," I said. "Had to sort out some issues with Bill's old accounts." Sarah's face went very still. "Issues? Oh, you know how it is with estates. Sometimes things take years to resolve properly. The bank found some irregularities in the withdrawal patterns, wanted me to verify certain transactions. It was a complete lie, but Sarah's reaction confirmed my suspicions. Her face went pale, and she gripped the reception desk with white knuckles. "Irregularities?" she asked carefully. "Withdrawals that don't match my records. Small amounts over several years. The bank's fraud department wants to investigate. Make sure nobody's been accessing Bill's accounts inappropriately." Sarah's professional composure cracked slightly. "That sounds serious." "It could be. Identity theft is a federal crime, especially when it involves deceased persons' accounts. The penalties are quite severe, from what I understand. I'm sure it's just a clerical error, Sarah said quickly. Banks make mistakes all the time. Probably, I agreed, though the investigator seemed confident they could trace the source of any unauthorized access. Said modern banking systems keep detailed records of everything. Amy was watching our conversation with growing confusion, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Sarah noticed and forced another bright smile. Well, I should get back to work. Thanks for stopping by, Margaret. It was so nice of you to think of me. Of course. Dear, family is everything, isn't it? I left the dental office with Sarah's panicked expression burned into my memory. For the first time since this nightmare began, she'd looked genuinely afraid. Not just surprised or caught off guard, but deeply, viscerally frightened, which confirmed that my instincts were correct. Sarah's theft from Bill's accounts was significant enough to constitute serious criminal activity. Her affair with Marcus was just the surface of a much deeper deception. But more importantly, I'd learned that Sarah's secret relationship was an open secret among her coworkers, which meant other people had information that could be useful to me. I drove home planning my next move. Sarah was no longer in control of this situation, no longer managing all the variables in her elaborate deception. I'd introduced chaos into her carefully ordered lies, and chaos was exactly what I needed to bring her whole corrupt system crashing down. The game had changed, and Sarah was about to discover that she wasn't the only one who could play it. Friday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Rose Patterson's voice was tight with excitement when she called at 7:30 a.m. Margaret, you need to get over here right now. I've got something you're going to want to see. 20 minutes later, I sat in Rose's kitchen, staring at a manila folder thick with photographs and documents. Her nephew Danny worked as a process server and had connections throughout the county's legal system. Danny did some digging like I asked, Rose explained. Turns out your Sarah's been busy with more than just affairs and bank theft. The first photograph showed Sarah leaving a lawyer's office downtown, one that specialized in divorce proceedings. The second showed her meeting with a real estate agent outside Kevin and Sarah's house. She filed preliminary divorce papers 3 weeks ago, Rose said, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting half of all marital assets plus spousal support. My stomach dropped. But she and Kevin seem happy. He has no idea anything's wrong. That's the point. She's positioning herself for maximum financial advantage when she drops the bomb. Look at this. Rose spread out property assessment documents. She's had the house appraised, inventoried all their joint assets, even had Kevin's tools and equipment evaluated. She's planning to take him for everything he's worth. The calculated nature of Sarah's long-term planning was breathtaking. While Kevin talked about starting a family and Marcus offered him promotions, Sarah was systematically preparing to destroy both their lives and walk away with maximum profit. There's more, Rose continued. Danny found court records from Oregon. Sarah was married before to a man named David Chen, divorced him under similar circumstances after cleaning out their joint accounts. Sarah had done this before. She wasn't an opportunistic cheater who'd gotten in over her head. She was a professional predator who targeted stable men, gained their trust, then systematically looted their lives before disappearing. What about the affair with Marcus? Exit strategy, Rose said grimly. Based on the timeline, she started sleeping with Marcus right after filing the divorce papers. She's using him as financial and emotional security while she destroys Kevin legally. The photographs continued to tell the story. Sarah meeting with private investigators, probably gathering evidence of Kevin's supposed shortcomings to use in divorce proceedings. Sarah at a bank different from their usual one, likely setting up accounts Kevin didn't know about. She's been planning this for months, I whispered. Longer. Danny thinks she married Kevin specifically to have a comfortable base while setting up her next score. The affair with Marcus wasn't passion, it was business. She needed his resources and connections to pull off the perfect divorce. My coffee had gone cold as I absorbed the scope of Sarah's deception. This wasn't about love or attraction or even greed in the traditional sense. Sarah was running a sophisticated long-term con, using marriage as a cover for systematic financial exploitation. We have to tell Kevin, I said. With what proof? Everything Danny found is technically legal. Consulting divorce lawyers. getting property appraised, even having affairs. Morally reprehensible, but not criminal. The bank theft is criminal, if you can prove it. Sarah's smart enough to have covered her tracks there. The withdrawals from Bill's account were small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts, and they happened over years. Any competent lawyer could argue mistaken access or claim you gave her permission. I stared at the photographs of Sarah's secret meetings, feeling helpless rage build in my chest. She'd played everyone perfectly, anticipated every possible complication, positioned herself to walk away wealthy, while her victims were left devastated and broke. There has to be something, I said. Some mistake she made, some way to expose her. Rose gathered the documents back into the folder. Maybe, but Margaret, you need to understand what you're up against. Sarah isn't some amateur having a midlife crisis. She's a professional who's done this before and perfected her methods. Then I'll have to get better at this game than she is. I spent the afternoon creating my own war plan. If Sarah wanted to play chess with people's lives, she was about to discover that a 67-year-old widow could be a formidable opponent. First, I called Jim Morrison at Bill's old accounting firm. Jim, I need you to file a formal fraud report with the bank about those withdrawals from Bill's investment account. Include copies of everything you sent to the woman claiming to be my daughter-in-law. Margaret, are you sure? Once I file that report, there's no taking it back. The bank will investigate, possibly involve law enforcement. I'm sure. Sarah's been stealing from my family for years. It's time she faced consequences. Next, I called Kevin's supervisor at the construction company where he worked before joining Marcus's firm. Tom, this is Margaret Sullivan, Kevin's mother. I need to ask you about something confidential. Of course, Mrs. Sullivan. How can I help? When Kevin left your company to work for Marcus Webb, did Marcus contact you directly about the hiring? There was a pause. Actually, yes. He called asking about Kevin's work history, his character, his family situation. Seemed very interested in Kevin's personal life, asked specifically about his wife and home situation. What kind of questions? Whether Kevin was happily married, financially stable, had any personal problems that might affect his work performance. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough, but looking back, the questions were oddly personal. Marcus had researched Kevin before hiring him, specifically investigating his marriage and financial stability. He hadn't just met Sarah and fallen into an affair. He'd targeted Kevin's family deliberately, chosen them as marks for whatever scheme he and Sarah were running. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Sarah and Marcus weren't just having an affair. They were business partners, running a sophisticated marriage fraud operation. Sarah seduced and married targets while Marcus provided resources and cover. Then they systematically looted their victims before moving on to the next family. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that Kevin's elderly mother would be irrelevant to their plans, too naive and grief-stricken to notice what was happening to her family. They were about to learn that underestimating a determined widow had been their fatal error. Saturday evening, I sat in my car outside the Riverside Inn, waiting for Sarah and Marcus to arrive for their weekly tryst. But this time, I wasn't there to gather evidence. I was there to deliver a message. At exactly 6:15 p.m., Marcus's blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Sarah arrived 5 minutes later, following their usual pattern. They met by the hotel entrance, shared their familiar kiss, and walked inside hand in hand. I gave them 30 minutes to get settled, then walked into the hotel lobby. The desk clerk, a bored-looking young man reading a paperback novel, barely glanced up when I approached. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm supposed to meet my daughter Sarah, but I seem to have lost her room number. She's with a gentleman named Marcus?" "Oh, sure," the clerk said. "Room 237. Nice couple. They're here every week." Every week. Their affair was so routine that hotel staff recognized them as regulars. The casualness of their deception, the public nature of their private betrayal, made my anger burn even hotter. I took the elevator to the second floor and walked down the carpeted hallway until I found room 237. I could hear voices inside, laughter, the clink of glasses. They were having drinks, celebrating another successful week of manipulating my son. I knocked firmly on the door. The voices inside went silent. After a long moment, Marcus's voice called out cautiously. "Yes? Marcus, it's Margaret Sullivan." "It's Margaret. We need to talk." The silence stretched longer this time. I could imagine the panic, the whispered conversation, the desperate search for explanations that might salvage their situation. The door opened just wide enough for Marcus to slip out into the hallway. He was disheveled, shirt partially unbuttoned, face flushed with alcohol and embarrassment. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, pulling the door closed behind him. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you're having an affair with my son's wife in a hotel room you visit every week." Marcus's face went pale. "How did you know about this?" "Marcus, I've known for weeks. The question isn't what you're doing, it's what you plan to do about it." "Mrs. Sullivan, please, let me explain." "Explain what? That you targeted my family specifically? That you researched Kevin before hiring him, investigated his marriage, his finances, his personal vulnerabilities? That you and Sarah have been running a systematic fraud operation?" The color drained from Marcus's face completely. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you? Because I've done my own research, Marcus, about your previous business partnerships, about Sarah's previous marriages, about the pattern of financial exploitation you two have perfected over the years." The hotel door opened behind Marcus, and Sarah emerged wearing a hotel robe, her face a mask of cold calculation. Gone was the sweet daughter-in-law persona, replaced by something much harder and more dangerous. "Margaret," she said, "this is awkward." "Not as awkward as it's going to get," I replied, "since I've already filed fraud reports with the bank about Bill's stolen money, contacted divorce attorneys about your secret proceedings, and compiled evidence of your systematic deception." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. They were communicating silently, rapidly calculating their options, and probably deciding how to handle this threat to their operation. "What do you want?" Sarah asked finally. "I want you to disappear from my family's life, both of you. Cancel the divorce proceedings, end the affair, and get out of Kevin's life permanently." "And if we don't?" Marcus asked. "Then I go to Kevin with everything I know. Show him the photographs, the bank records, the evidence of your previous victims. Let him decide how to handle learning that his wife and his boss have been systematically destroying his life." "Kevin won't believe you," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe not initially, but the evidence is overwhelming, Sarah. DNA tests on the money you stole, testimony from hotel staff who recognize you, bank records showing your secret accounts, your own divorce attorney's records." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photograph Rose had taken of them entering the hotel. "Plus, surveillance evidence of your affair. Kevin's going to have to believe something." They stood in the hotel hallway, two predators caught in the act, weighing their options. I could see them calculating whether they could salvage their plan or if they needed to cut their losses and run. "You have 48 hours, I said. "Either you disappear voluntarily or I destroy you publicly. Your choice." "Margaret," Sarah said, her voice taking on a pleading tone, "Kevin loves me. Even if you tell him everything, he'll forgive me. We can work through this." "Maybe. But can you work through federal fraud charges? Because stealing from a deceased person's accounts is a serious crime, Sarah. And Marcus, your business licenses won't survive the scandal when your affair becomes public knowledge." The threat landed exactly as I'd intended. Marcus's construction company depended on reputation and client trust. A public affair scandal, especially one involving employee exploitation, would destroy his professional credibility. 2 days, I repeated. Make your choice wisely. I walked back to the elevator, leaving them standing in the hallway, their perfect crime finally falling apart. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Not the grieving widow, not the naive mother-in-law, but the woman who'd raised a son alone and survived 42 years of marriage. Sarah and Marcus had underestimated me completely. They'd seen only what they wanted to see. An elderly woman too grief-stricken and trusting to recognize their manipulation. But I'd been learning their game, studying their methods, and now I was playing by rules they didn't understand. Rules where honor mattered more than profit, where family loyalty trumped personal advantage. They had 48 hours to decide whether they wanted to disappear quietly or be destroyed publicly. Either way, their reign of terror over my family was about to end. Sunday morning brought unexpected visitors. I was making breakfast when 3 cars pulled into my driveway. Kevin's truck, Marcus's sedan, and a vehicle I didn't recognize. Through my kitchen window, I watched Kevin get out looking confused and upset, followed by Marcus, Sarah, and a well-dressed woman carrying a briefcase. Sarah had decided to fight back. When Kevin knocked on my door, his face was a mixture of worry and bewilderment. "Mom, Sarah says you've been following her around town, making accusations about her and Marcus. What's going on?" Behind him, Sarah stood with tears streaming down her face, playing the role of wounded victim perfectly. Marcus looked appropriately concerned, and the woman with the briefcase watched everything with professional interest. "Come in," I said. "All of you." They crowded into my living room, an awkward assembly of accusers and accused. Sarah positioned herself next to Kevin, leaning into him for support while shooting me looks of hurt betrayal. "Mrs. Sullivan," the woman with the briefcase said, "I'm Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's attorney. My client tells me you've been harassing her with false accusations about financial crimes and personal misconduct." "Is that what she told you?" I asked calmly. "She says you've been following her to her workplace, making threatening phone calls, and spreading malicious rumors about her marriage." Kevin looked stricken. "Mom, is this true? Have you been spying on Sarah?" "I've been protecting you," I said. "But yes, I've been investigating Sarah's activities." "Investigating?" Kevin's voice cracked. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Sarah squeezed his hand, tears still flowing. "Kevin, I think your mother might be having some kind of breakdown. Since your father died, she's become obsessed with the idea that people are trying to hurt your family." The performance was masterful. Sarah had positioned herself as the concerned daughter-in-law, worried about her mother-in-law's mental health, while I looked like a paranoid elderly woman making wild accusations. "Mrs. Sullivan," Jennifer Walsh continued, "harassment of my client needs to stop immediately. We're prepared to seek a restraining order if necessary." "Really?" I said. "Based on what evidence?" "Witness testimony from her co-workers about your unexpected visit to her workplace, where you made threatening statements about bank fraud investigations." Sarah had prepared for this confrontation, built a legal strategy around portraying me as an unhinged elderly woman. She'd anticipated my moves and had counter-moves ready, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd brought this fight to my house. "Kevin," I said, "before we go any further, I want you to understand something. Everything I'm about to show you, I wish I didn't have to, but you deserve to know the truth about your marriage." "Mom, please don't do this," Kevin said. "Whatever you think you know, I know that Sarah's been stealing money from your grandfather's bank accounts for 3 years. I know that she's been having an affair with Marcus for 6 months. And I know that she's filed for divorce and is planning to take you for everything you're worth." The room went silent. Sarah's tears stopped, as if someone had turned off a faucet. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, and Jennifer Walsh's professional composure flickered. "That's insane," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. I walked to my dining room table and retrieved the folder of evidence Rose had compiled. "Kevin, I have bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals from Bill's investment account. I have photographs of Sarah and Marcus entering hotel rooms together. I have documentation of her secret consultations with divorce attorneys." Kevin stared at the folder like it might explode. "You're making this up. Look for yourself." I spread the evidence across my coffee table. Bank statements with highlighted withdrawals, photographs of Sarah and Marcus at the hotel, copies of property appraisals and legal consultations. The timeline of deception laid out in irrefutable detail. Kevin picked up one of the hotel photographs, his hands shaking. "Sarah, what is this?" "Kevin, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain why you're kissing my boss in a hotel parking lot?" Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. The tears, the victim act, the concerned daughter-in-law performance all fell away, replaced by cold calculation. "You want the truth, Kevin? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Marcus. Yes, I consulted divorce attorneys. Yes, I accessed some of your father's old accounts." She stood up, straightening her shoulders. "Your marriage was suffocating me. Your family was suffocating me. I needed something more." Kevin looked like he'd been physically struck. 3 years, Sarah. We've been married 3 years, and you've been planning to leave me the whole time." "Not the whole time. But Kevin, you have to understand. I have needs you can't meet. Financial needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs. So you decided to steal from my dead father and sleep with my boss?" Marcus finally spoke up. Kevin, it wasn't supposed to happen this way. Sarah and I, we tried to fight it, but sometimes these things just— Shut up, Kevin said, his voice deadly quiet. Just shut up, Marcus. Jennifer Walsh was packing up her briefcase, clearly recognizing that her client's legal strategy had just collapsed. Sarah, I think we should discuss this privately. No, Kevin said. I want to hear all of it, right here, right now. How long has this been going on? How much money did you steal? What else have you been lying about? Sarah looked around the room, calculating her options, probably searching for some way to salvage the situation. But the evidence was overwhelming, the betrayal too complete. Everything, she said finally. I lied about everything. Kevin, my feelings for you, my reasons for marrying you, my plans for our future, all of it. The confession hit Kevin like a physical blow. He sank into my armchair, staring at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. Why? He whispered. Because I could, Sarah said with chilling honesty. Because you made it easy. The cruelty of her response seemed to break something inside Kevin. He looked at me with eyes full of pain and understanding. You tried to warn me, didn't you? All those times you seemed concerned about our finances, our relationship. You knew something was wrong. I suspected, I said gently. But I hoped I was wrong. Kevin stood up slowly, looking at Sarah with an expression I'd never seen before. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. And if you ever come near my family again, I'll have you arrested for theft. Sarah and Marcus left without another word, followed by Jennifer Walsh. Kevin and I sat in my living room, surrounded by the evidence of his destroyed marriage, the silence heavy with grief and betrayal. Mom, he said finally, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. You loved her, I said. That's not something to apologize for. But as we sat there in the aftermath of Sarah's confession, I realized this wasn't over. People like Sarah and Marcus didn't just disappear when their schemes were exposed. They regrouped, they planned revenge, they looked for ways to salvage what they could from the wreckage. The confrontation in my living room had been a victory, but the war was far from finished. Tuesday afternoon brought a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about Sarah's deception. Detective Linda Morrison from the County Fraud Unit spoke with the professional courtesy that comes from delivering bad news to crime victims. Mrs. Sullivan, we've been investigating the bank fraud case you reported, and I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we initially thought. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. More serious how? Sarah Martinez isn't her real name. Her actual name is Sandra Mitchell, and she's wanted in 3 states for marriage fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. What happened to your family wasn't random. Mrs. Sullivan, you were specifically targeted. The words hit me like ice water. Targeted? Sandra has a pattern. She researches recently widowed families through obituaries and social media, identifies targets with assets and vulnerable adult children, then systematically infiltrates and exploits them. Your husband's obituary mentioned his business success and your close relationship with your son, Kevin. I thought about Bill's funeral 5 years ago, the newspaper article that had highlighted his accounting firm, his community involvement, his surviving family, information Sandra had used to select us as marks. How many families has she destroyed? I asked. We've confirmed 7 cases across Oregon, California, and Nevada. Probably more we haven't identified yet. She's been running this operation for at least 10 years, stealing approximately $3 million from her victims. $3 million. Sarah wasn't just a cheating wife or opportunistic thief. She was a professional criminal who'd turned marriage fraud into a lucrative career. There's something else, Detective Morrison continued. Marcus Webb isn't just her current boyfriend. He's her business partner. They've been working together for 5 years, using his construction company as a front for money laundering and his employee database to identify targets. The scope of their deception was staggering. Marcus hadn't just fallen into an affair with an employee's wife. He'd been running a sophisticated criminal enterprise, using his legitimate business to scout potential victims. Kevin was never supposed to be just a husband, I said, understanding flooding through me. He was supposed to be a cover identity. Exactly. Sandra typically marries her targets, gains access to their assets, then divorces them while claiming abuse or abandonment. The legal system tends to side with wives in those situations, especially when they have documentation of emotional distress. But she made a mistake with our family. She underestimated you, Detective Morrison agreed. Most of her previous targets were isolated men without strong family support systems. Your involvement in Kevin's life disrupted her usual pattern. The phone call ended with promises of arrests, asset recovery, and criminal prosecution. But as I hung up, I realized Sandra's most dangerous phase was just beginning. Cornered criminals were unpredictable, and Sandra had spent years perfecting her survival instincts. That evening, Kevin came to dinner looking exhausted and hollow-eyed. The past few days had aged him years, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. "The police called," he said as I served his favorite meatloaf. "They want me to testify about Sandra's activities, help them build a case for the other victims. Will you do it?" "Of course. But Mom, they warned me about something. Sandra's previous victims, some of them faced retaliation when she was exposed. Property damage, harassment, threats." A chill ran down my spine. What kind of threats? The detective wouldn't give details, just said I should be careful, maybe stay somewhere else for a while. "Kevin, this is my home. I'm not going to be driven out by some criminal who targeted our family." "I know, but maybe just temporarily." The sound of breaking glass cut through our conversation. My living room window exploded inward, showering the room with sharp fragments and letting in the cold October air. "Get down!" Kevin shouted, pulling me toward the kitchen as another window shattered. We crouched behind my kitchen island, listening to the sound of destruction as more windows broke. Car doors slammed outside, engines started, vehicles drove away at high speed. When the noise stopped, we cautiously emerged to survey the damage. Every window facing the street had been broken. Rocks and bricks littered my floors, mixed with glass and debris. Spray painted across my front door was a message in red letters: "Keep your mouth shut." Kevin called the police while I stared at my destroyed living room, feeling violated in a way that went beyond property damage. This had been my sanctuary, the home I'd shared with Bill, the place where I'd rebuilt my life after his death. Sandra and Marcus had turned it into a crime scene. "Mom," Kevin said after hanging up with 911, "you can't stay here tonight. This isn't safe." "They want me afraid," I said, anger replacing shock. "They want me to back down, stop cooperating with the investigation." "Maybe you should. Maybe we both should." I looked at my son, seeing fear in his eyes that went beyond concern for broken windows. Sandra had destroyed his marriage, stolen his trust, shattered his faith in his own judgment. Now she was trying to intimidate him into silence. "No," I said firmly. "We're not backing down. We're not letting them win." "Mom, you don't understand what we're up against. These people are dangerous. Kevin, I've spent 5 years grieving your father, wondering if I'd ever feel strong again. Tonight, looking at what they did to my home, I don't feel afraid. I feel furious." The police arrived within minutes, followed by a crime scene photographer and Detective Morrison herself. As they documented the damage and collected evidence, I made a decision that would have shocked the grieving widow I'd been just weeks ago. "Detective Morrison," I said, "I want to help you catch them, whatever it takes. Mrs. Sullivan, these people are clearly dangerous. Witness protection might be—" "No. They targeted my family because they thought we were easy victims. It's time they learned how wrong they were." As I stood in my destroyed living room, surrounded by broken glass and police officers, I realized that Sandra and Marcus had made their final mistake. They'd mistaken my grief for weakness, my age for vulnerability. They were about to discover that threatening Margaret Sullivan's family had awakened something they couldn't control. The trap we set for Sandra and Marcus was elegant in its simplicity. Detective Morrison arranged for me to make a recorded phone call to Sandra, ostensibly begging her to stop the harassment and offering to withdraw my cooperation with the police investigation. "Sandra," I said when she answered, my voice carefully trembling with fear, "please, we need to talk. What you did to my house, I can't take any more of this." "Margaret," Sandra's voice was cold, triumphant, "I was wondering when you'd come to your senses. I want this to stop. The police investigation, the charges, all of it. Kevin's been hurt enough." "Smart woman. What are you offering?" "I'll tell the police I was mistaken about the bank withdrawals, that I gave you permission to access Bill's accounts. I'll recant my testimony about the affair, say I misunderstood what I saw. There was a long pause. And in exchange? You and Marcus leave town, disappear, never contact my family again. That's not enough, Margaret. You've caused us considerable inconvenience. We've lost income, reputation, business opportunities. The greed in her voice was unmistakable. Even caught and exposed, Sandra was looking for ways to profit from the situation. What do you want? I asked. $50,000, cash. Consider it compensation for our trouble. I don't have that kind of money. Find it. You've got 24 hours, or your family's problems are just beginning. She hung up, but not before the recording equipment captured her explicit extortion demand. Detective Morrison smiled grimly as she reviewed the tape. That's conspiracy to commit extortion, on top of everything else. Now we just need to catch them in the act. The meeting was set for Thursday evening at Riverside Park, the same location where Sandra had once felt safe conducting her secret affair. The irony seemed appropriate. I sat on a park bench with a briefcase full of marked bills, watching the darkness gather around the playground where Kevin had played as a child. Police surveillance teams were positioned throughout the park, invisible but ready. At exactly 8 p.m., Sandra and Marcus emerged from the shadows. Sandra looked different, harder somehow, her mask of domestic sweetness completely discarded. Marcus appeared nervous, constantly checking the surrounding area for threats. "Margaret," Sandra said, settling onto the bench beside me. "You look terrible. Stress doesn't agree with you." "Neither does having my home vandalized," I replied. That was Marcus's idea. I prefer more subtle approaches to problem solving. She reached for the briefcase, but I held it firmly. "First, I want to understand something. Why my family? Out of all the people you could have targeted, why us?" Sandra smiled, and for the first time I saw the predator beneath her carefully constructed persona. "Your husband's obituary was perfect. Successful businessman, devoted family man, grieving widow with a vulnerable son. You practically advertised yourselves as ideal victims. How long were you planning this before you met Kevin?" 6 months. I researched your entire family, learned Kevin's schedule, his interests, his weaknesses. I even took a construction safety course so I'd have credible knowledge when we met. The premeditation was chilling. Sandra hadn't stumbled into Kevin's life by chance. She'd hunted him like prey, studying his habits and vulnerabilities before moving in for the kill. "The bank theft started immediately after our wedding," she continued, seemingly enjoying the opportunity to boast about her manipulation. "You made it so easy, keeping Bill's account information in his desk, trusting me to help organize his papers." "And Marcus?" "Marcus was insurance, a backup plan in case Kevin became suspicious or the marriage became inconvenient. Plus, he had access to other potential targets through his business." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Sandra, we should go. This feels wrong." "Relax," Sandra said. "Margaret's not stupid enough to involve the police. She knows what happens to families who cross us." That was her final mistake. The casual threat, delivered with such confidence, provided the last piece of evidence Detective Morrison needed. Police officers emerged from the shadows, surrounding the bench before Sandra and Marcus could react. Detective Morrison stepped into the circle of light, badge clearly visible. "Sandra Mitchell, Marcus Webb, Marcus. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit extortion, fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny." Sandra's expression shifted through surprise, anger, and calculation in rapid succession. Even handcuffed, she was looking for angles, searching for ways to manipulate the situation. "This is entrapment," she said, as officers read her rights. "My lawyer will have these charges dismissed within a week." "Your lawyer will be busy," Detective Morrison replied. "We've connected you to frauds in 7 states, Sandra. You're looking at decades in federal prison." As they led Sandra and Marcus away, she turned back to me with pure hatred in her eyes. "This isn't over, Margaret. I have friends you haven't met yet." "No," I said calmly. "This is over. And your friends can find me at the same address where you found me. I'm not hiding from people like you anymore." 6 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom watching Sandra Mitchell receive a 25-year sentence for her crimes. Marcus Webb had pled guilty in exchange for testifying against her, receiving 10 years for his cooperation. Kevin sat beside me, holding hands with Lisa, a teacher he'd met at a community college photography class. The healing had been slow, but he was rebuilding his life with someone genuine, someone who loved him without agenda or calculation. "Thank you," he whispered as the judge delivered Sandra's sentence. For what? For not giving up on me. For fighting when I couldn't. I squeezed his hand, thinking about the woman I'd been before Sandra entered our lives. Grief-stricken, passive, content to exist on the margins of other people's decisions. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood that love sometimes requires fighting dirty, that family protection demands whatever weapons you can find. Sandra had targeted us because she thought we were weak, thought grief and age made us easy victims. She'd learned too late that underestimating a mother's love had been her fatal mistake. As we left the courthouse together, Kevin, Lisa, and I walked into a future built on truth instead of deception, love instead of manipulation. It was exactly what Bill would have wanted for us. And exactly what Sandra had never understood about the family she tried to destroy. Some bonds can't be broken, no matter how carefully you plan their destruction.